Hello guys and welcome to a new episode of Leubner's Lecture. Today we're going to talk about JDBC, so Java Database Connectivity, in combination with a PostgreSQL database running in our background here. Before I want to start, I want to mention that this video is part of my lecture at the Higher Technical School of Kaindorf in Austria. Okay guys, so let's take a look at what we're going to do today. I created a new Maven project here, and for everyone who is new to Maven, with Maven we have the possibility to bring in external dependencies. And as we're working with a Postgres database, we need the dependency for the PostgreSQL driver. This is the first dependency here. Then we're going to use the Hikari connection pool as an external dependency and the Lombok library to create a lot of our boilerplate code. Okay, so once done, let's just refresh everything and let's go forward. We need to do some things because we're building up a structure for our database project. So the main goal for this video is to really give you basic information on how to retrieve information from the database, how to create new objects there, how this whole thing works together with IntelliJ and so on. And first of all, what I would like to do is I would like to come up with structure that might help you to organize your classes. So first of all, I want to create a config package. I want to create an exception package. Oh, I mistyped that one. Let's just get rid of that once again. So it should be exception. Then I would like to create another package for our model classes or entity classes. Then I would like to create a package for our repositories. So I will tell you exactly what these classes will be used for and these packages will be used for when we are at that stage. Then we have service classes, and that's it. And finally, we have our main class in the root directory here. In our resources folder, we first of all need a new file, and that file is called db.properties. And this database properties file is now used for development, because usually when we are in a live environment, all the information that we keep in here should be placed in environment variables or in external files. But for development, it's fine to keep them in that file here. We want to define three things that are important for JDBC or for our database connection, and or two things that are important for our connection pool that we're using. So the three information that we need to connect to our database is, first of all, the database URL. Then we need a database user, and we need a database password. So these are the things we need to set first. And then for our pool, we need a maximum size, and we also need a minimum idle size. Okay. So these are the things that we're going to set. So the idle size will be 2 and the maximum size will be 10. So we want to have a maximum of 10 connections in our pool. The URL to connect to our database starts with JDBC, then a colon, then PostgreSQL, and then the path, which in our case is localhost because it's running locally / and then the database that we're going to use. And we're using a product database, so I just created the database before. It's a clear blank database with no classes, no schemas in there. The user by default should be Postgres, and the password was set up to be geheim123 for my setup here. We also can connect to the database on the right hand side if we just go to data source and then search for PostgreSQL down there. We can just leave everything as it is, just enter Postgres here and the password there, which gives us the possibility to open up this database folder here, and then we can select which database we want to connect to. And in our case, I would like to connect to the product DB, so I'm selecting that one, testing the connection, and if everything is fine, we're connected. So we see on the right hand side, this is the total empty database. We don't have anything in here, but we have a console that we can use afterwards to work with. So that's pretty cool stuff there. Okay. So the first task that we need to follow is we want to bring this information here somehow into our program. And we do this with a new class, and we call this class AppProperties. And this AppProperties class is being used to read all the data here. Okay, so what we're going to read, first of all, we are reading our database URL. Then we read our database user. Then our database password. Let's do everything in caps. So, and then we also need our database pool max size and database pool min idle. So these are the things that we're going to read, and we're not using a constructor or anything. I just want the values to be there as soon as I'm accessing them or the class is loaded. So I'm using a static block here. We're creating a new instance of the properties class. So the properties class is what we're going to use, and this static block is pretty cool because as soon as we access one of the instance variables of our static variables, or we call a static method, or we create an object of the class, or it's first initialized by the Java virtual machine, these are all the points when this static block will be called to initialize our variables. So we really don't have to use a constructor or anything here. So that's pretty cool. The next new thing that might be new to you is the try and catch block that I'm going to create. So basically this looks pretty normal. So we're just catching an IO exception, and we throw in runtime exception if something is not correct with loading that. We're also passing the cost here. But what we're using, let's just close it up. What we're using here is a try with resources block, which means in here we can define our input stream. And from the class information, we can get the resource as stream, which means that get resource as stream always refers to the resources directory here. So we just have to start with a slash, that's important, and then we can pass whatever file we want to access in there or data structure. And the cool thing about the try with resources block is that automatically it doesn't matter whether we end up in the try or in the catch block, the input stream is closed at the end without doing anything. And this can be examined by just seeing that the closeable interface or the auto closeable interface is implemented, which helps to do that. So this is called an try with resources block. Okay, that's pretty cool stuff here. Good. So if we do something wrong with the input stream or the file is not there, then it will be null. And in that case, we also have to throw an exception. So to just skip our program. So db.properties could not be found will be the exception here. But if we can find it, we can just use the property class to load everything from the input stream. That's pretty easy there. And then we're just grabbing whatever we need from props with get property. And then it's db.url, for example. And if we now head back to our db.properties file, we see that that just got blue, which means we're using it, we're reading it somewhere. All the others are still gray, which means they're not used, but this one just became blue. So let's go on for the user. So it's props.getProperty, db.user. Then we have the password. which in that case is props.getProperty db password. And then we have our pool max. Ooh, I misspelled something. It should have been size up here and size down there. As this is an integer, we have to pass it first. And it's props get property, and I think we named it something like max size. Let's check it afterwards. And then we have our min idle integer.passInt get property, and this should be pool.min idle. So let's just check if we used everything. So everything got blue. Looks pretty good. Okay, so we can just test this simple thing by creating a main method here and just printing, for example, the URL. So let's run that, and the URL is here. So that looks pretty good. Seems like everything's working, and I really tend to test all of them because it's not that cool finding out afterwards, and we might be debugging for a long time if we're not sure that everything worked out fine here. So these are all our values, all our 5 values, and no one should be null. Okay, so this means we did everything correct with the app properties. Looks good. Okay, so now we have all the information in our program. The next step now would be to create a new data source, to create a new connection to our database, sorry. And therefore, we're using the DatabaseConfig class that we're creating in our config package. And we have different possibilities to go for that. And the common way is to use a driver manager and to just say something like driver manager. Let's just create a main method to show you that. Would just be to say driver manager get connection and then passing the URL. This one, the URL, the user, and the password. But this would give us a new connection for every statement, which isn't pretty good idea, and also using the same connection for all statements isn't best practice. So what we do is we're going to use this Hikari connection pool, and therefore we're going to create an instance first of all. So it's the Hikari data source that we're using. Let's create that, and this has to be initialized some way, and as this is static, I'm once again going to use a static block. First, we need to create a new config because using the config, we can set all our properties. So first of all, what we need to set is the JDBC URL, and we know we can get this from our AppProperties. Then we want to set the username. Also, this can be found in AppProperties. And then we want to set the password, not the pool name, the password, which can also be grabbed from our properties. If you still remember, we also entered the max pool size. So this is here. Also comes from our app properties. And then we also set the minimum idle, which also can be read from our app properties. Great, so we have our basic stuff. Let's maybe just define some more interesting things here. So we give that whole thing a name. Then we define a connection timeout, which might be interesting. So after 5 exception without getting in connection, an SQL exception is thrown. Then we have the leak detection threshold. So it's 10,000 here. So if an exception is not returned within these 10 seconds, then we get a warning. So returning means after using it for executing a statement. And then we have the max lifetime that we're setting here. So after, let's go 1,800,000 should be it. So 2, 4, 5 zeros maybe. So this means after this 1.8 million seconds, so it's 30 minutes, we're closing a connection. Okay. That's it. And now we can create a new data source using our configuration. And yeah, I think that's it. What we still need is a method to get the connection. And here, please be careful to use the SQL connection and not any other connection. So it's get connection here. And we're just returning the data source dot get connection, which throws an exception. And we're just adding it to the method signature. And in the very end, we need a method to close our pool, because at the very end we have to close our pool using the data source dot close method. Okay, so we can just find out if everything works fine by just grabbing one connection and bringing it to the console. I'm pretty sure we will not see that much of information, but at least we should see that there is a connection that does something. Looks good. And we also have an exception here because Hikari pool uses the SLF4J logger and he cannot find anything like that. So I'm just returning to the bomb.xml and I'm adding this SLF4J part here, which should then make it easier. Yes, so now we have all the information in here and it looks pretty good. Perfect. So this is what we like to do. Okay. Now, as we have a connection and we can create connections, let's also maybe close the connection afterwards. Let's also call the close pool and try it again. And we should also see closing information. Yeah, so starting, we edit, start completed, shutdown, shutdown completed. Perfect. So everything looks pretty good. Before we continue with our model, I really would like to create an exception here because I think it makes sense to have an database exception in a way that we want it to be. Exception, and we're extending this from the runtime exception because this makes sense. So it's runtime exception, and we're choosing a constructor here, and we are using the one with the message and the cause because I think both of it makes sense here. Okay, so let's go to our model, and our model is pretty cool because our model should be all the classes that represent information in our database. So let's go for a category because we have a product database. And within that category, we need, first of all, an ID, and then we need a name. And I'm using wrapper classes here because elements might be null in a database. So just to be sure that we don't have any problems when loading data to our Java application, I'm using the wrapper classes here. Good. And now I'm just using Lombok library to first of all create all our important information, to go for the allAux constructor, and to go for the required aux constructor. So if you're interested, guys, in knowing more about Lombok, you can just go to my channel, and there you should find a video about Lombok itself, where I just explain what this is all about and how that should work out. Okay. So I'm not going into details here once again. What I would like to do is for the name, I would like to set non-null here because I don't want that to be null. And I also would like to include my own toString method because I want my toString to be the ID colon and then the name of the category. So this is what I want to be returned here. So this is our category class. So the next class that we're going to create is the service class. So let's create the service, and all these classes, so the service and the repository classes always start with the name of the model they belong to, and then service or repository. Okay, so we don't care which of these two. And usually what we do in here we provide methods that might be called by the main class, for example, or by any app controller when it comes to JavaFX and so on. And the first method that we need is an init database, and we're using that to create the database. This service class doesn't have direct access to the database, but the repository class has. So we're creating a category repository, and this category repository is the class with direct access to our database where all the statements are executed and so on. And also in here, we should just have a method called public void createTable, and in here, we're creating our SQL statement. So let's go for our SQL statement first. If you would like to have some auto-completion, you can just inject the language reference here, search for PostgresQL, and now you have some cool auto-completion here too, okay? So if the table does not exist, we're creating a table category. Wrong brackets. Exists category. Then we're creating the table, and what we have an ID. The ID is 0, which means it's just automatically incremented, and then we have a name, and this name is a varying character 100 and cannot be null. So that will be the whole statement, and now we need a connection and then a statement, and both of this is once again defined in a try with resources block here. So we are creating a connection. The connection is created by our DatabaseConfig, so our pool, if you remember. And then we also need a statement that we execute afterwards. So we're creating a statement from our connection. What we're catching down here is the SQL exception, and whenever this happens, we're just throwing a new database error, so part of our error where we say the table category could not be created, which makes sense, and we're also passing the error, okay? And in here, it's just really easy because we're just using the execute statement. We see this returns just true or false if the statement was executed or not. And we're just passing the SQL, and that's it. And finally, so that we also see that something happens, we just write down table category created, and this whole method is done now. If we go back to our category service, we can now call the repository. So we need a instance variable here, final category repository. We're creating a new one there. It should be final because it should not be created again. And then we're just calling the create table here. And now to test if everything is correct and if our table is created, we head back to our main class. And in this main class, we are creating a main method. We create a category service here and a try and catch block because we are catching some things there. But I'm doing it here because I want to close the pool at the very end. This is why I'm using the try and catch block here. And first thing to go for is just the init database. So we can call this anytime, so nothing should happen. So let's try. When we are running it, we get some information, and at the end we see, yes, our database should be created. So our table should be created. Let's refresh what we did here, and we see, yes, perfect. We have a table category. We have the ID, which is our primary key, is automatically created, and we also have our name, which cannot be null. So that's perfect. But still, if we go to show all the data, nothing is in there. So it's still empty for sure. And this is why we're going to insert some data right now. Okay. So we're going back to the repository, and in that repository, we're going to create a new method, and that new method now is called public. We're returning the category that's being inserted, insert, and then it's category here. Pretty cool things. Let's go for the SQL statement. And the statement is insert into category. Remember, we're just inserting the name because we expect the ID to be created automatically by the database. Okay, so make sure to use single quotes here for the strings. And what I'm also doing here finally is I'm writing returning the ID because I want this statement to return the ID when it's done. Good, so for executing this statement, we just need the same as before. So we need a connection first of all. So using our DatabaseConfig, and then we also need a statement. So we're creating a new statement here. Once again, we have a catch block. We're catching the SQL exception. And what we do here, we're throwing a new database connection where we say category could not be saved. And we're also passing the cause here. Perfect. Okay, and in here we do the same as before, but with one difference, because we cannot use execute right now because we expect this statement to return something. And when we expect to get a result, we can use the execute query. And execute query returns a result set. And a result set, once again, is something that needs to be closed. Therefore, we're using the resource try with resources block again. We're creating just a new result set with execute query. We're passing our SQL string here. We don't have a catch clause. We don't need it. And result set is always pointing to the result before the first one. So if we want to access the first result, we have to check if there is a next one. If there is a next one, then we are fine. We can set the ID that was just returned, and we can get the ID from the result set either by passing the column index, where, be aware of that, we start with 1 and not with 0, or with the label. And I'm a big fan of using the label because the label name can be controlled in our statement. So it makes more sense for me to use the label name here. So we're setting the category, and then at the very end, we can just do something like category created, and then we're passing the category, and in the end, we're returning the category. So nothing will change if we do this right now because we don't have a service method yet. So let's go back to our service and create a new method here. And we're calling that create category. Remember, we have to pass a category here. I will only pass the name. I think that makes more sense right now. So if the name is equal to null, that would be a problem. Or if the name dot is blank, then we have to throw a new, I cannot type anymore. We're throwing a new illegal argument exception, which is saying the name cannot be empty here. Usually this error shouldn't come up if we have the non-null exception. So at least we could have skipped the name equals null. And then we have the category repository dot insert, and we're creating a new category here, just passing our name. Great. So, and then we're heading back to our main, and what we do here is we're creating a category hardware. So category service create category hardware. So there we go. Let's run it. So category created one hardware, and if we now take a look at the data in our database, we see perfect. It's in there. That looks pretty good. And now I would like to show something or to try something out because we always want our code to be pretty secure. And what I'm doing now, so hardware has already been created. Um, let's create a new one. So remember we had our hardware in there. Let's create a software right now. So we just create a new category, but what we do now is software. But now I'm doing some interesting stuff. I'm using a single quote here, a bracket, and a column, and then I'm just doing something bad because I'm going to clear the category table. I'm just running it once again, and yes, we have some errors. Something is not correct. Seems so, but the table also is empty. And this is called SQL injection. And the problem why this is happening is because we used some unsafe methods in our category repository. So let's just head back to our category repository here. And what we see or what we did is we were using a normal statement doing something like that. And this is never a good idea. So whenever we use data from a user, make sure to not use a normal statement. So we have to change some things here because we are now using a so-called prepared statement, and it's prepared from our connection, and we have to pass the SQL. And our SQL gets pretty short because the only thing we have to do is we have to use a question mark for every value that we want to insert. And then for our statement, we can just set, for example, a string here at the first question mark. That's why the 1 is written there. And what we write down is category to get name. Everything else just stays as it is. So we don't have to do anything else. And now let's run this one again. We still get some errors then here. It tells us that the table was created, but then cannot use query method to take a query string on prepared statement. This happened because I did something wrong. Where did I do something wrong? Prepared statement here. We had the statement there. Oh, here, yeah, we cannot pass that one to the execute query as it is already a statement. So now everything looks good. And if we take a look at our data now, that's pretty cool. We have the just software here in there. So it's just writing down the whole text that I'm used to inject my exception or my delete here. Yes. So it looks pretty good, but this is not what we want to do, but basically this works out. Okay, so that we have a way to get rid of all of this. Let's go back to the repository and create a delete method. So we have insert now. Now we are also creating a delete method. So delete by ID, and we're passing the ID here. Then we have our SQL statement, which is delete from category where ID equals question mark. And then all the things once again. So this is why I'm going to copy it from here because it always is the same right now. So we are grabbing a connection, we are grabbing a prepared statement, and we are setting a long value right now, which is the ID that we're grabbing. So we are grabbing that here. So we should maybe pass something else, but I'm not sure if I did it correct. No, it looks good. It just tells me that an integer might be required to pass here. Oh, I forgot the parameter value. So it's the first parameter. Looks good. And then we're just doing a statement dot. And now we're taking a look at the third option, which is the execute update. So we the execute query, and now the execute update. And the execute update just returns an integer stating the number of changed rows. Okay. So we're using an execute update here, and category could not be deleted. If we go back to our category service right now, we're also creating the delete category here. So it's public void delete category with our ID. And then it's just category repository delete by ID, and we're passing the ID. And that's not pretty cool because we cannot test if we somehow can get rid of that one. It was number 3. So what we do is category repository delete with the ID 3. Let's see if that does something. So we don't get any exception and the data should be gone. The question is, what happens if we run it again? Nothing happens if you run it again because it just says 0 rows were affected. That's what the result here is when using the where is our repository here, when using the execute update. Good, guys. Okay, so we now have delete. Okay, let's go for getById maybe. That might be pretty interesting. So instead of delete by ID, we're using a getById, and I think it just makes sense to copy that because there won't be much difference. So it's for sure now getById. We're passing the ID here. It's now select ID and name from category where ID equals something. We have our connection, we have our prepared statement, we're setting all of these things. But now we are expecting a result. So we have a result set here, which is created when we use execute query. And if our result set.next has a value, then something should be returned. And what we're returning is just it's just a category. And the category consists of an ID first of all, so result set.get long. This is the ID, and the second parameter is then the string, which is the name. So this is what we would like to create here and what we would like to return here. And it gives us an error here. And the reason for that is that we have a void up here. So we want to create a category. As soon as we do this, we are fine. Okay, so this is how you can get the category by an ID. Let's go back to the service and make sure they will also implement that one. So public category get category by ID when passing the ID in here, and then it's just category repository get by ID, and this is what we are returning, and get category by ID. Okay. Great. Okay, let's not only grab one category, but grab all the categories. So we want to grab a list of categories, and we're calling this get all categories. So this is what we're doing here, and we're just returning a get all method. It's not created yet, so we're going to create it in the repository. So we have the get all method now down here, and this is pretty interesting right now because we just do the same thing as before. Maybe let's just copy it once again, because it's really the same statement, just we don't have the category here, which means we can use a normal statement. So we don't need a prepared statement, so we don't have to set anything up right now. we're using the execute query, and now we have to change some things in here. So the first thing that I do is outside that statement here, I'm creating the list to be returned, and this is a list of category. It's categories, it's a new array list, and at the very end, I'm just returning the category. So it might be an empty list if something goes wrong. What we now need to check here is that this result set is in an own try block, but we don't have to keep it in here. So we can just also place it up here. And now as we have multiple results that we're looking for, we're just checking, or we're just getting results as long as there are new ones. So we're just adding new categories here with our result set.getLong for the ID, and with our result set getString for our name. And we're just adding all of these elements, and then we just put them to the we just put them to the array list. And while doing that, could not, we have to change that. Could not get category with ID, so that we have that one here, and we have to do the return category. I forgot to do that one. Oh no, we're doing a return there, but we have to return null if something is not correct. And in here, could not load all categories. Let's go for that, okay? And I think that should already do it. And then finally, I would like to do one last thing, which might be interesting, and this is the update. So how does an update usually work? So we're updating a category. With the category as the ID is our primary key, we only can update the name, because otherwise that wouldn't make any sense. So category, so we are setting the name to be question mark, where the ID equals question mark. Now we need to go up one more, because we need a prepared statement now. Let's grab that thing here, and we're going to set two things. So first of all, we're going to set a string. So the first thing will be the string, which is the new name that we want to set. And then we are setting a long, it's the second parameter, and this is the ID that we want to overwrite, okay? That's the important thing here. And then we're just calling the statement.execute update, and that's it. And then we say could not update category with ID category.getID, so we know what's going on. And finally, we have to create a service too, and we're naming that service down here public void update category, and we're passing an ID and we're passing a name here. And here we have to check if the name is equal to null, or if the name is blank, because if so, we cannot use it. And then we're throwing once again an illegal argument exception. The name cannot be empty. And if everything works out fine, we can just call the update. We're just temporarily creating a new category with ID and name, so that we know that one should be updated. And I think that's it, okay? So I think we did a very good job. So we have a create category, we have a delete, we have a get category by ID with all categories, and we have an update category. And now we go back to our main method to try out if everything works, okay? So we created a new category hardware, or we want to create a new category hardware. Then I would like to create two more categories. So one for software and one for accessories. So let's go here for software and here for accessories. That looks pretty good. Then we are just printing all categories. We already have something to do, so we can use get all categories. We're using it for each, and just a method reference here to print them to the console. Then we could go for a category with an ID. So let's grab the hardware category here. And we're just printing get category by ID. So we're using hardware.getID. So hopefully it's the hardware category that's being returned afterwards. Then we're updating a category. So we are grabbing the software and we say it's now software and licenses. So what happens after the update? Let's once again get all categories and dot for each system out print line. Let's do the \n here. This is this part there. Yeah, and then let's delete something. So delete the category, so accessories.getID, and then let's just print all the categories once again after delete. Perfect. So this looks like a good test case. Let's run everything and let's see if everything works out fine. So we have category 4 hardware, 5 software, 6 accessories is created. So we see all of them are returned. Looks good. We have a category with the ID 4. After the update, everything should have changed, and after the delete, everything is deleted. And if we take a look at the category right now, we should just have 2 of them, which is hardware and software and licenses, because we have deleted the accessories. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And yes, guys, this is already the end of the video. This was a pretty short introduction on JDBC, so just some first basic steps. If you like these videos, and I hope you also enjoyed it, then just leave a like or subscribe my channel, because there will be more videos about JDBC and JavaFX, so how to combine these two technologies. So just stay tuned and have fun learning. So thanks for watching, guys, and see you again next time. Bye.